Hey guys, Michelle from OG Rose. I just wanted to do a quick recording reflection on this wonderful conversation I saw over at Theory Underground by, it was hosted by Dave and Anne, and it was who I really love. Shout out to Anne and Dave for being awesome. And they were interviewing and just talking with and just having a discussion. It wasn't a full-on interview, but they were posing some questions to Nina for them all to discuss. And so their guest was Nina Power. And yeah, I loved the conversation. It was on their series, What's Right. They also have a What's Left series. Both are phenomenal. And I just love the work that they're doing over there at Theory Underground. So please go check them out. And if it piques your interest or it lights you up, try and get involved. It's a really great thing that they're doing. And so, yeah, with that said, this conversation was kind of discussing nature. It was discussing why kind of body autonomy and, agency of one's own health has kind of become a more right-coded thing, generally speaking. Obviously, that's not true for everybody. But it has become a little bit more of a right-coded thing. And in the past, Nina had said that in the past for her, like growing up, it was definitely considered like a leftist, crunchy, liberal type of thing, to care about your, making your own choices for your own body and, wanting to have clean water and good food and shop at local go to local farmers markets and, be suspicious of pharmaceuticals or the pharmaceutical complex. And that was kind of definitely a left thing. And now it's become, again, right-coded to have that suspicion and sort of see like, oh, wait, I have to be the one of taking care of my own health just because I'm the one living my own life. So, it's really has to become this kind of radical self-responsibility. Anyways, why has this shift happened? Why has that shift happened? And Nina really well identified that it could have something to do with how we see health. What is health politically? And I thought that was really good. And so, I wanted to flesh that out a little bit more and think about maybe the fact that health also has to do with what we conform our health to, because health isn't always, it's not just in like a vacuum, our health is relational, our health is, it's in a conversation with decisions that we make, right? And those decisions are often informed by somebody saying this is a good thing to do, right? To either maintain your good health or to fix your bad health, to get you back to good health. So that those suggestions or that standard of what that is usually from some authority, right? There's some authority to that. And I think that that's really where, we've seen what used to be kind of like liberal, I'll decide for myself, has become a little bit like, it's a twofold thing now, like where it's I'll decide for myself, but I'm going to do what the science says, right? I'm going to do the responsible thing because I'm not somebody who's like backwards and doesn't believe in progress. I'm going to do the things that science says and what the authorities say is good for my health, So I think that there's something about like I want to say it does usually have the veneer or the languaging of self-expression and self-care, not that those terms are wrong or bad or anything like that. I'm just saying that today I think we see a kind of, I'm making my own decisions for myself and my health, but really there is a kind of conformity there, right, to what is said to be the best thing to do for your health and to maintain your good health, or to, again, fix your bad health, hopefully to get back to the homeostasis of good health again. Whereas on the right side today, I think people are just a little bit more, like they're willing to admit that they do conform. They conform to, for a lot of the right would be like, or for, I don't want to say a lot, but I would say it's definitely in line with right-coded is a belief in God, right? Theism. And saying, we conform to God's design of our bodies and the earth, and therefore we're going to conform to that as a standard by which to make decisions about our health and for our health. Because again, health isn't just this thing in a vacuum. It's always relational. It's always relational with our own decisions and what inputs and outputs we're dealing with. So so that's interesting, and I think that's for me what kind of really was standing out to me. Like that's really, there are a lot of amazing points from this conversation that I really think are super important, super important. And this particular question of like what caused the shift and the consideration of health and how we view health really stood out to me. And I will say too, I think that, yeah, I'll go on this little tangent really quick, and maybe it'll be interesting to somebody, maybe not. But I will also want to add that, to think about the left liberal, crunchy, hippie, it does remind me of the hippie movement. And that used to be the left's relationship to its own health. What's interesting, what is interesting with what happened there was that it also took place, the hippie movement in America at least, it also coincided with the sexual liberation, right? Which was largely afforded, not only, like there are other, people avoiding conception has been something around, like has been a part of human history forever, right? Like for a long time, it's not like, oh, it's just new that people would try to have sexual pleasure without conceiving. However, today we do have technologies, and several different technologies, and even an ethic behind using birth control, right? Or circumventing the natural consequence of full sexual activity. So yeah, all this to say, what does this relate back to the whole, conformity and questions of how health has shifted over time? I'm trying to bring this up because the hippie movement was an interesting two-folded thing too. It was like this, I'm going to be liberated from authority and kind of back to nature. But there was also at the same time, for some, not all, and maybe it wasn't, maybe you could say just was two subsets happening at the same time, but unlikely. I think there were a lot that were both thinking back to nature, but also sexual liberation, almost being more animalistic, right, with our desires and instincts, but that relying on a pharmaceutical, right, the pill, as a means by which to be free, right, but free from your own, like, body, right? So it's, or free from an aspect of your body, I should say, right? Free from an integral part of the human body, which is the reproductive system and its fertility. So it's interesting because, like, there's this, sexual liberations happening during the hippie movement, but there's also this idea of like just admirable goals. I mean, not that can't be admirable. There is a place for sexuality being able to be something that's able to be not like so stigmatized and not repressed, right? But also there have to be like healthy and good understanding of what's appropriate or not, because that's when you also, if you have liberation but you have no parameters, then that's when you get people like this, all of the confusion around that, and like a lot of hurt and a lot of pain and a lot of violations that occur. But then it's like, well, what moral system is kind of saying that it should be a violation in the first place? If it's about sexual liberation, it should be like, okay, sexual liberation, and we understand proper constraints for this because we want to liberate it because it's so good, but we also, it's good in the way that like fire is good in a hearth, it's amazing because it feels so warm and cozy, but like it's also can burn everything down, right? That's what sex is. So it's, anyways, that's a tangent, but all that to say, I think that how we relate to sexuality has changed drastically too. And, whereas in the hippie movement, it kind of came together with this like two-folded thing of I'm free from authority and establishments and the industrial complex, and I'm back to nature. But it also came with I'm a woman and I can have sex without getting pregnant, right? But that also meant she was possibly relying on this new technology, which was the pill, which came out around in the 60s. Maybe it came out sooner than that, but I'm pretty sure it was a technology right around the 60s. And in terms of it being like an accessible, pharmaceutical that people could get. And yeah, so that's really, really interesting that there's this like twofold thing going on. Now every side of the spectrum can have its own sort of like contradictory things that seem very contradictory. So it's not just, I'm not picking on the hippies for that, because everybody does it in their own way. But I do think it's an interesting thing to think as it relates to this question of health and how that has shifted. Because I think slowly but surely that it's like that started to become a reliance on sort of like intervention into your health for you to, an intervention into one's health by pharmaceuticals. And then like, so the pharmaceutical complex, the surgical complex, the industrial complex, the internet complex, all of those things have like really contributed to the left, generally speaking. Obviously this is broad brushstrokes here, but this sort of I want to say anti-establishment while becoming almost very establishment. And maybe that's because when you get the anti-establishment, there's a lot of, like I said, complexity that can arise from those complexes. Like there's a lot of complexity because then you're like, well, again, with the sexual liberation thing, we're sexually liberated, but who defines what's a violation or not? Then you get into consent, but how do you ever kind of verify that consent or have that be able to be something you could present in like a court of law? So it's very difficult. And the complexes of the industrial complex, pharmaceutical complex, they don't give you like they can give you a sense of this is something that is going to be good for you and this is going to be helpful for you, right? But they don't give anything beyond that, really. They don't. And so I wonder if like slowly but surely the push towards more and more people becoming college educated, that's the first time people are stepping away from their own family units and having their own, like experimenting with their own ideas of what it means to live a good life and have good health and be well. And, a lot of times feeling good can be a part of what people think of as good health, which is understandable. So it's like, yeah, that's where that kind of gets, again, furthered and furthered. And so, what it seems to me to show is that this relationship with, again, sexuality, what it means to be like have good health, but how it relates to foreclosing or even muting for a time, a certain aspect of your health and your body, you're just how you are made, like it's a part of your body. And that's the funny thing is like you learn about it in science and or family life class or something like that, right? But then there's this sort of, it's an interesting relationship with it, because as soon as you can say, well, you can do the good stuff about it, but not the hard stuff that would tie you down to like a whole nother human life, right? Or human lives. It's tricky. I think it's not realistic, really. And so therefore, like science, which is supposed to be very realistic, can also give these very unrealistic senses of what things actually are, like what sex actually is. And that's where you get a lot of that confusion. And yeah, for some people that is just, they don't see it as confusion, it's freedom, right? And I can't say for another person if that is like indeed a sense of freedom or not. But what I will say is that it is a type of freedom that isn't always acknowledging its conformity, right? It's a conformity to a reliance on certain complexes that are massive, that don't know you, that don't know your context. It's just this kind of dynamic of something that's like, available to all people and everybody can access it, and yet it doesn't it doesn't know you, and it actually doesn't have anything to do with like your actual biology. It can impact your actual biology, but it's not like something that has any integral inherent relationship to your body. And so, yeah, that's really interesting because, again, on the right side, I think we see a push toward, or we see that shift today because of agency being like more on the side, self-agency, radical self-responsibility being on the right, because maybe there's this idea of like, yeah, no, we do conform. We conform to a design. We conform to, there's a God and he made the earth this way. He made our bodies this way. So we have to like work with that without just completely shutting, like ignoring basically parts of the full function of that functionality of those elements of our body, like say our reproductive system. We can't just sort of like ignore that is something that actually is a part of its full expression or its full use or something like that, or full functionality, like it's funny to think about being more functional to close your ears all the time, and so it's just about like a lot of times our decisions on what is the right thing to do or the best thing to do or the good thing to do is like honestly what we're thinking is the best thing to do, or what we'd like the most, or what would be best for us, right? But yeah, it's again I wonder if the sexual liberation also has a lot to do with why our view of health has changed. I do also think that, and Mary Eberstadt talks about this in her great book, Adam and Eve After the Pill, Paradoxes of the Sexual Liberation Movement, like that. And I may have mentioned this book already in this recording, but basically she's talking about like how the irony is that there's these paradoxes, sexual liberation and freedom and empowerment has like led to so many women feeling completely disempowered and struggling with mental illnesses and all sorts of things like this. And so that's another thing that's then kind of can be picked up by a pharmaceutical intervention or relief. And I'm not saying that is always necessarily bad, just like it's, there are reasons, there are obviously people always have good reasons for using pharmaceutical interventions. And sometimes for some people, like it can be a life or death situation for such intervention. So it's, it's not to say that, it's to get more thoughtful with them. It's to get way more thoughtful with them, and realizing like that these do create certain conformities and reliances that we have to kind of acknowledge, and like how sustainable is that in our own self, in our own power, in our own capability, So yeah, I think I finished that last thought there, but yeah, just Mary Eberstadt saying like, oh, that's what I was gonna say. I think there's another confusion even there with like the mental health, and how there's a lot of kind of obviously like very sad, statistics and realities and anecdotal, evidence of people just really struggling with mental health, and anxiety, and yet it's almost like there's a strange thing too of like not being ashamed of having a mental illness, or identifying with having a mental illness. And I think in some ways it's good to not to like let go of the stigma of that, just like I mentioned with sexuality. At the same time though, it sort of gets then confusing of like, what is good health, right? And I think the right has kind of reclaimed that as saying like, no, there is the good, the true, and the beautiful, and that's why we can say what's good health versus not good health. And so it's sort of like wants to take I don't want to say wants to, it's doing the role of saying like of actually defining what that is, versus the complexity of, okay, well you may have a mental illness, but you shouldn't be, but that's actually maybe good because like we all like, we shouldn't like have some sort of, oh, it's bad to have a mental illness, but then again, it's like it literally is impacting the functionality of some people's lives where they can't even get out of bed. And like, is that good? No, like the person wants to be able to get out of bed. They want to be able to like actually function and, live their life and, enjoy just the beautiful things that life entails. And so, yeah, I think it's hard because if you have no standard, but you do have this kind of in the background standard of the complex, the pharmaceutical complex, industrial complex, internet complex, surgical complex, those things are actually sneakily doing the conforming and shaping of what people are ending up saying is like their own expression, right, or their own decision of their health. And on the right side is like, yeah, they are definitely just as much shaped and influenced and molded and kind of, if you will, limited by some sort of force, and that's for the right in general, that would be God, right? And this concept of like God having an actual design for the world and our bodies, and our relationships and all of that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that it's just a little bit more, they're a little bit more upfront about it. It's like, yeah, we don't deny that there is something that is choosing for me, essentially. It's God, but God's not going to like come in and live my life for me. I still have to make those decisions and actually do it. I have to actually do the stuff, and that's on me to do, right? Whereas like on the other side, there can be this sense of like, nobody's going to tell me what, nobody's going to tell me if this is good or bad or what I should be doing, but they end up getting a kind of should from some big thing in the background that's kind of taken over in the zeitgeist. And then though there's this sense of police, like almost feeling like, can somebody do it for me, or some pill do it for me, or something do it for me. And that's really hard, because unfortunately people get to the place of being so disempowered that they're not able to just see their own capacity, right? Their own capacity that they actually can do this, and that their body is incredibly made to be able to heal, and your mindset can shift. You can change your mindset, all of those things. So anyways, I'll leave it there. Definitely a very interesting conversation. And I think the beauty of actually the left and the right both having seasons in their existence of believing and caring about the soil, caring about clean water for everybody, caring about taking care of one's own health. Like, that's a beautiful crossover though, where I think both sides can be empathetic toward one another and say, hey, you know what, maybe we're not so different than we think we are, and maybe we can be able to cooperate and then like move forward and do cool things in the world that kind of help to achieve those goals. So anyways, yeah, thanks for listening. And again, do please go check out the work of Theory Underground and also Nina's amazing work, Nina Powers. So check her out. I know she's on Substack, and I think she writes for Compact Magazine, and some other published places. But anyways, thanks again, and I hope you have a great day.